Assembly of God Church on the first Sunday in February. It's so good to have you joining us today. I've been preaching from Genesis chapter 1, and this is my third week, and we're going to be looking at In the Beginning God Said, and we're going to be looking at creation days 3 and 4. A pastor from Missouri named Kevin Taylor makes the following comparison. Genesis speaks of the creation of the sun. Revelation tells of a place that needs no sun. Genesis speaks of the entrance of sin into the world. Revelation tells us of the banishment of all sin. Genesis speaks of the sin curse that is pronounced upon mankind, and Revelation tells us of the broken curse. Genesis speaks of Satan's first triumphant victory over mankind, and Revelation speaks of Satan's demise. And finally, Genesis speaks of the exclusion from the tree of life, and Revelation speaks of the admission to the tree of life. Now, last week, the focus of my message was the first 2 days of creation. That magnificent story of the beginning revealed God's creativity, majesty, and love. And God demonstrated power and love by creating. With only a spoken word, God created everything around us. With one decision, history began. So I've got a list about 10 things. Out of nothing came light. Out of light came day. Then came sky and earth. And on this earth, a mighty hand went to work. Canyons were carved. Oceans were dug. Mountains erupted out of the flatlands. Stars were flung. A universe sparkled. And our sun became just one of millions. Our galaxy became one of thousands. And planets are tied to the suns, roared through space at a breakneck speeds. So today we're going to talk about in days 3 and 4. So Genesis chapter 1, chapter 1, verse 9. Then God said, "Let the waters beneath the sky flow together into one place, so dry ground may appear." And that is what happened. God called the dry ground land and the water sea, and God saw it was good. Then God said, "Let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed-bearing plant, and trees that grow seed-bearing fruit, and these seeds will produce the kinds of plants and trees from which they came." And that is what happened. The land produced vegetation and all sorts of seed-bearing plants and trees with seed-bearing fruit. And their seeds produced plants and trees of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. And evening passed, and morning came, marking the third day. Then God said, "Let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be signs to mark the seasons, days, and years. And let these lights in the sky shine down on earth." And that is what happened. God made 2 great lights, the larger one to govern the day, and the smaller one to govern the night. He also made the stars. And God set these lights in the sky to light the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And evening passed, and morning came, marking the 4th day. So first this morning we're going to look at day 3, and we're going to look at those verses 9 and 10 again. Then God said, "Let the waters beneath the sky flow together in one place, so dry ground may appear," and that is what happened. God called the dry ground land and the water sea, and God saw that it was good. See, there seems to be a pattern to God's activities during the creation week. First, He formed, then He filled. He made 3 spheres of activity: the heavens, the land masses, and the waters, and then He filled them with the appropriate forms of life. And one of the first things God reveals about the way He works in our lives follows the same pattern. Listen closely. God is working out a purpose in our lives. He continually forms us and feels us. And we can count on His participation as surely as we can count on the daily pattern of the sunrise and the sunset. There are two distinct acts of God on the third day: the preparation of dry land in the seas and the furnishing of the dry land with vegetation. Now, there was a horizontal division made of the waters. First, the waters above were separated from the waters beneath. And scientists tell us at one time, every spot on the earth was covered with water. Then God gathered the waters beneath into the seas, and this separation caused the dry ground to appear. And we can envision that the earth's crust, as it became cooler and thicker, began to buckle, and islands and continents began to appear. So, what is God getting ready to do? Well, it looks like He's getting ready to make a place where He can put man, because man is not a water creature. And there are evolutionists who think we came from the sea, and there's others who think we came from seaweed, but we know they are wrong. In His second act on the third day, God furnished the land with bushes and fruit trees. Let me read it again. Then God said, "Let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed-bearing plant, and trees that grow seed-bearing fruit. And these seeds will then produce the kinds of plants and trees from which they came." And that is what happened. The land produced vegetation, all sorts of seed-bearing plants, and trees with seed-bearing fruit. And their seeds produced plants and trees of the same kind. And God saw it was good. At this point, there had been no rain, but dense mist watered the newly formed land, which was still warm by its own heat. Just think about this. It was a tropical climate everywhere. And vegetation must have grown rapidly and in gigantic proportions. And only seed-bearing plants and fruit trees are mentioned here. This is significant because these types of plants were designed by the Creator for sustaining human life. And the distinct varieties of plants bear witness to God's organization powers. In verse 29 it says this, "Then God said, Look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth, and all the fruit trees for your food. And I have given you every green plant as food for all the wild animals, the birds in the sky, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, everything that has life." And that is what happened. So we see that on that third day, God gives two divine commands. One that pushes back the waters to let the dry ground appear, and one that produces plant life from the dry ground. God is shaping the earth into a place for the habitation of animal and human life. Now, God has now created three structures: the land, the seas, the expanse of the sky. And He has declared each of these structures good. And in the next 3 days, He will fill these structures. Now, God has always been a God of order, and the order of creation validates this. Therefore, we can trust the order of God in the details of our life. And I am continually awed by the way God orchestrates our lives. I recently became intrigued by what I discovered about His design of one simple little flower, the sunflower. Do you know that sunflowers actually follow the sun? According to the researchers at the Wonder of Science, young sunflowers follow the sun. These flowers follow a natural biological rhythm to receive the most light for photosynthesis. And as the sun moves across the sky, as the days goes on, the young sunflowers follow along and they pivot to the west. However, when they mature, the flowers will only face east. And the reason for this is fairly simple. Bees like warm flowers, and the flowers facing the east are the warmest. And as these simple flowers depend on the light, we as believers must depend on our light. His name is Jesus. He is the light of the world. And we as believers are totally dependent on the Son, Jesus Christ. And we need to be like that young sunflower and always follow the sun. Day 4. Then God said, "Let the lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be the signs to mark the seasons and days and years. And let these lights in the sky shine down on the earth." And that is what happened. And God made 2 great lights, the larger one to govern the day and the smaller one to govern the night. And He also made the stars. On the 4th day, God filled the skies with sources of light. God created the sun, the moon, and the stars. And the sun generates heat and light, so it's easy to see how it can dispel the darkness and rule the day. The moon, on the other hand, generates neither heat nor light, but still rules the night, dispelling darkness by reflecting the light of the sun, which gives light to the whole earth. Now, let's pause just for a moment and consider the size of our earth. The circumference of the earth at the equator is 24,901.55 miles. I think it's fair to round that off to 25,000. Now that's pretty big. It's bigger than what my little tiny brain can imagine. But it's easier for me to imagine our earth as the size of a golf ball. Now I can get my mind around that golf ball. I can pick it up, I can examine it, I can feel the little dimples in it. The only thing I can't do is hit it really straight. It likes to go this way and that way and that way and all the ways I don't want it. But if we picture the earth the size of a golf ball, imagine yourself shrunk down to the size that would allow you to stand on that golf ball. Can you see yourself on the golf ball making its way through the universe? God can. He never loses sight of you. He knows exactly where you are in the universe that He made. So if the earth is the size of a golf ball, then how does that compare to our sun? Now, we learned in 3rd or 4th grade that the earth is 93 million miles away from the sun. And if we shrunk the sun down in proportion to our golf ball size earth, then we're only 1,642 feet away from the sun. But the sun is 109 earths wide and is as high as it is deep. That means that the sun could hold 1.3 million earths inside of it. Now, to help us to put that into perspective, think this. If the earth was a golf ball, then the sun would be a ball 15 feet in diameter. Now, I don't know exactly what this ceiling is. I know it's more than 10, probably more than 12, maybe close to 15. And another way to picture this would be to imagine a school bus filled with golf balls from the floor to the ceiling. Our sun is pretty big. And you and I are standing on just one of those 1.3 million golf ball size earths. So the sun is the nearest star to earth. How big is the sun compared to our earth? 1 million spears the size of our earth can fit into the sun. Now, if 1 inch represents 10 million miles, how far would it be before it have to reach the sun? Well, I can tell you, I could take one step and I would be there. But if I wanted to get to the next nearest star, I would have to walk 40 miles. See, the second nearest star is 300,000 times as far away as the sun. Now, by the way, our sun is one of the many stars in the galaxy called the Milky Way. And a galaxy is a vast island of stars in space. And do you know how many stars there are in our galaxy alone? There are some 100 billion stars in the Milky Way. Genesis 1:16, I'm going to read it again because it's something you didn't catch. God made two great lights, right? The larger one to govern the day, the smaller one to govern the night, right? We got that. He also made the stars. And making the stars may have seemed like an afterthought, but it wasn't. Psalm 147:4 tells us, He, talking about God, counts the stars and calls them all by name. He knows where every star is. He knows them all by name. His words formed them. He spoke them into existence. Now, I wouldn't advise it to do it tonight, but on a nice summer night. Have you ever tried to count the stars? It's impossible. You can't do it. If you look into the sky on a clear night, you will see a few thousand with your eyes. But with a modest amateur telescope, millions will come into view. Astronomers estimate there are about 100,000 million stars in our Milky Way galaxy. And outside there are millions upon millions of other galaxies. That is how big our God is. That is how mighty God is. In his book entitled One Incredible Moment, Max Lucado says, if God is able to place the stars in their sockets and suspend the sky like a curtain, do you think it is remotely possible that God is able to guide your life? If God is mighty enough to ignite the sun, could it be that He's mighty enough to light your path? If He cares enough about the planet Saturn to give its rings, or Venus to make it sparkle, if there's an outside chance that He cares enough about you to meet your needs? And I think the answer is yes. For the last couple of weeks, I've found beautiful songs talking about the creation of the earth. And as they get ready, it's a song I've never heard of until I started studying, researching. Go ahead and put it up for me, Chelsea. It's called So Will I by Hillsong.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. And if the stars were made to worship so loud, I can see your heart in everything you made. Every burning If creation sings your praises, so will I. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty. Your